Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Diving into the third segment on Calvin Ridley, the new Tennessee Titan. This deal happened just yesterday. The Tennessee Titans needed another playmaker on top of DeAndre Hopkins. They have a new young quarterback in Will Levis. They just signed Tony Pollard. They just needed a bit more excitement, a bit more playmaking to add on the outside with Hopkins, and they got it in Calvin Ridley. Probably the best free agent left at that point in the market, along with Arik Armstead and other players, Devin White, Jerome Baker, of those caliber kind of guys that could make an instant impact. The only thing that was surprising more than the news itself was the kind of contract that he got. 4 years, $92 million, $50 million guaranteed. And I think that caught a lot more people by surprise than the Titans making a move for another playmaker. They were in talks with a lot of wide receivers to add more firepower to their offense. But it was surprising because, like I mentioned, the money, but also because everyone that talked about this situation with Calvin Ridley and all the reports that I read were of the mindset that Calvin Ridley and the Jaguars were holding off on this deal because they were essentially doing the Jaguars a favor, or the Jaguars were trying to do what's best for them by waiting until the new league year started yesterday in order to prevent the Jaguars from owing the Atlanta Falcons a second-round pick if they got a deal done before the new league year started, and coughing up that second-round pick to the Atlanta Falcons for the terms that were agreed that sent Calvin Ridley from the Falcons to the Jacksonville Jaguars. That was the original idea. That's what everybody had in mind. But once the new league year did start, the deal didn't really happen right away, and people were actually thinking that Calvin Ridley was testing the market out in all reality after the new league year started, instead of looking out for the Jaguars and re-signing with them, as everybody thought. He was potentially testing out all the other offers from other teams, waiting for these other offers to come in right away to potentially sway him. And it was reported that the Patriots were interested, as well as other teams, I'm sure. But once you get a contract offer like that from the Titans, I think, Calvin Ridley, like a lot of players should do, I think he didn't think twice about it, looking out for his best interest at 29 years old. How much better of a deal are you going to get than 4 years, $92 million? It was mind-boggling to me that they offered that much to him at 29 years old. But again, all kudos to him for making that kind of money. It's great for him as a player, and now he joins the Titans team that is looking pretty exciting, I think, in all terms, just because you have Hopkins, Ridley now. I think Tony Pollard could be exciting, on top of Will Levis also being an exciting young quarterback from some of the games that I watched last year. So the Titans are kind of moving in a different direction. The reports on the story on Calvin Ridley, it said that the constant word that was being popped up was modernize their offense, modernize this team. Because with Mike Vrabel, I think you saw it kind of take a step back in the other direction, trying to be powerful, run the ball every time with Derrick Henry, have these maulers as offensive linemen, and have wide receivers that could block. You throw in a play action here or there, and you keep it simple, you keep it in your face, intimidating kind of offense. And now you have a new guy coming in here in Brian Callahan from the Cincinnati Bengals, their old offensive coordinator. Now he gets to run his own team, his own offense. I'm sure he's going to be involved with it and modernizing the team, modernizing the philosophy of the team. The organization was a constant that he always brought up. And in his introductory press conference, he said, "The teams that win the most games are generally the teams that pass the ball the best." And just that thought alone, you look back at the Tennessee Titans last year, they ranked 5th to last in receiving yards on passes thrown outside the numbers. You only have DeAndre Hopkins to throw to, basically, with a young quarterback, looking for Hopkins, looking for his most reliable option. Those passes aren't always going to be on target. He's still learning and developing, and quite frankly, once teams double team Hop, it gets very dicey for a young quarterback. I was impressed with Will Levis in some of the games that he did play and played very well. Some games that he was in close games with other teams. He had a big win against the Miami Dolphins in Miami, if my memory serves me right. So those kind of games, there's excitement there. I liked what I saw from Will Levis, and now adding Calvin Ridley to this equation makes it very exciting. And going back to Calvin Ridley for a few seconds on his contract, he's now the fifth highest paid wide receiver with $23 million per year, making more than the likes of Cooper Kupp, Keenan Allen, Debo, Mike Evans now on his new deal, more than his new teammate DeAndre Hopkins. And he's paid $1 million less than Stephon Diggs, and people are more aware of what kind of contract he holds, how big it is. So Calvin Ridley is now in that space, and it leads to the first kind of question that pops up in people's heads once a deal like this is made is, was it worth it to get Calvin Ridley for this amount? You couldn't find a cheaper option, maybe a Darnell Mooney from the Chicago Bears before the Atlanta Falcons scooped him up. Wouldn't he have been maybe not the same level of production as Calvin Ridley, because I still believe Calvin Ridley is a low tier, middle tier wide receiver one. He might not give you the production that a Calvin Ridley would have, but he definitely would have been cheaper for them to maybe explore other aspects of this team. To that, I would say I think Calvin Ridley definitely could have come at a cheaper cost. Did the Titans jump on it maybe too early and were too eager? Maybe, but at the same time, you want to make sure you get Calvin Ridley. Like I mentioned before, he was the best free agent available. So if you have a chance to get him, you want to make sure, you go and get him. You make sure he signs. Once he sees that deal, he forgets about everything else and he signs. So you do understand it a little bit, but with more reasoning, with making such an important deal like this, I think I maybe wouldn't have done it. If it meant not paying 4 years for $92 million, then I probably would have moved on to somebody else. But now that it is done, I think there are definitely some positives, like the production you're going to get from him. He was very good for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Like I mentioned, he's coming off 2 back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. And just the kind of journey that he's gone on with the gambling stuff and everything like that, you think he'd lose a step, but last year he proved, I think, a lot of people wrong. He looked like he really hasn't missed a step at all, and he was a good target for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And one thing to point out, just on the idea of the Titans modernizing this offense a bit more, trying to change it to be more exciting with Brian Callahan coming in, I think if he would have came in with Mike Vrabel still here, I think it would have been more of a loss for the Titans than it is with Brian Callahan. I think he suits this team more now that they're trying to change their identity. It seems to me like they've gone with a bit more finesse, a bit more skill set, and ability, rather than physical, run-heavy, powerful players on their team like they tried to do with Mike Vrabel and what kind of offense he wanted to run. It was successful, don't get me wrong, with their couple years that they were around the playoffs and in good playoff games. But now, towards the end of his tenure, you kind of saw that, it was a bit overdone. It wasn't really getting anywhere new. They were always just in low-scoring, tight games. And one, they weren't winning them. And another thing is that it's not exciting, so people are just going to criticize it anyway because they're not really liking what they're seeing. So it's always going to have a negative connotation to it. With Brian Callahan, he's coming from a spread, exciting, down-the-field offense with T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, Joe Burrow, throwing it a lot of the time in these games. They might not have that skill set yet. Definitely not, I should say, with Will Levis comparing him to Joe Burrow. You have good receivers now, but I think you have to build it up a little bit more. I like Tony Pollard in this type of offense. I think they're going to use his pass-catching ability a bit more, and that sort of idea of them being more finesse, more modern in it, I like it. And it brings me to my next topic, next question that you could think of is, where does this put them now in the hierarchy of the AFC South? I think the Texans are the best team in that division. The Jaguars have made some good, impressive moves. They actually just signed Arik Armstead to their defensive line. I think it was 3 years, 51 million or 31 million, something like that, before I came on the air to do this show. So they're also rebuilding a lot. They got Darnell Savage from the Green Bay Packers as well. So they've made some good moves. They've got some good pieces, but I think just right now, I might be riding the Titans' coattails a bit too much right now, but I think the Titans have just jumped them just a little bit because they not only made their team better with Calvin Ridley, they made the other team worse with Jacksonville because now they don't have a number one receiver. They signed Gabe Davis, but we haven't seen him be the only receiver on a team that has constantly put out great performances. That's still a question there. If Gabe Davis would have been there with Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram, I would have said that the Jaguars are going to challenge the Houston Texans a lot more. But because he jumped over to a rival team in the Titans, I think it'll be a closer battle between the Tennessee Titans and the Jacksonville Jaguars for that second spot than it will be with the Texans for that first spot, if that makes sense, you know. I think the Texans, I love the signing of Joe Mixon, or the trade with Joe Mixon, Daniel Hunter coming over, Azeez Al-Shaair also coming over from the Titans to the Houston Texans, so that's massive as well. Plus the development of Will Anderson, Christian Harris was a good underrated player that I love. I think he broke out in the playoffs a bit more. And then it goes without saying, CJ Stroud, Tank Dell looked like an absolute stud. Nico Collins establishing himself more as a number one receiver. I think they're a tier above the other teams. And the Titans, I like what they're doing. But the Jaguars, I also like what they're doing. And I think it'll be closer between those two guys. And in all reality, the Colts are kind of being the ones left back. I think they need to make an exciting move like this. We still have to see what Anthony Richardson looks like. But they're kind of being left behind a little bit. So overall, I love this for the whole AFC North or AFC South, I should say. Because before, when I looked at them, the games weren't really that great. You kind of knew what team was better than the rest. Last year it was the Jaguars to start the season, and then it was more exciting because the Texans grew into that. They were exciting as well. Now you have the Tennessee Titans not only adding good pieces, but trying to change the identity of them. And everybody wants to see more points now in the NFL. All the offense is getting the love now. They're trying to switch more into that sort of team. And I think the fans are going to love it. It's going to bring excitement to the city of Tennessee, or the team of the Tennessee Titans, and all that just wrapped into this whole division. I think it's going to be great for the whole AFC North. The AFC just keeps getting better, more competitive, more exciting with all these additions and trades within the conference. I'm looking forward to watching the Titans now more than ever. I can confidently say that. And I think it's going to be great for that division, for the whole AFC. And next season is just going to be all in all really positive, I think, with all these changes. I keep saying it more. It seems like this offseason has been more crazy with more blockbuster moves than I could remember in any other offseason. As a fan, I love it, and I'm excited to watch it. I wanted to start right away, but we're obviously a lot of months removed from the start of the season. But that's where I'll leave the conversation. I'm going to send it to the final break of the show, and on the other side of it, I'm going to bring you all the comments from Dak Prescott's brother, what he said about the Eagles, and how that makes Dak look, and how it all ties into the all-in comments made by Jerry Jones back a few months ago, or a month ago, at the Senior Bowl. So stick around. You're not going to want to miss and be part of that conversation on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.